Okay, so our first topic is physical quantities, and the learning outcome of this topic is that you have to understand that all physical quantities consist of a numerical magnitude and a unit, and you have to know how to make reasonable estimates of physical quantities. So let's get started. So what do we mean by physical quantities? Basically, physical quantities are quantities that can be measured. It contains a magnitude and a unit. Physical quantities are of two types, the first being base quantities and the second being derived quantities. What are these things? First, I recommend you to write everything that is on the screen and then I can get started. Alright, so let's see what is actually physical quantities. So suppose I have a friend, okay, it's a cute friend. I have a friend and my friend will be running from point A to point B, and I want to know that how much time he takes to travel from point A to point B. How can I find the time? I can simply use a stopwatch, right? Or suppose that I want to know the distance between point A and point B. So I can simply measure the distance from point A to point B using a measuring tape, right? So these values, for example, the time or for example the distance, this can be measured, and these are exactly physical quantities. Another example of physical quantities can be speed. For example, to find the average speed of my friend from point A to B, I need the distance and the time. So I can write that the distance by time, and suppose that the distance is 10 and the time is 2. So my friend's speed is average speed is 5 meter per second, right? So you can see that this velocity we could measure it. Might be that we had to make some calculations, but even through the calculation we could measure the velocity. So this is a quantity that can be measured. So what do we mean by it contains a magnitude and a unit? So let's see. Here we found the velocity, and this velocity contains one, a magnitude, and two, it contains a unit. It goes same for the time. For example, the time was suppose 2 seconds. So this 2 seconds, it has a magnitude and it has a unit. So by definition, every physical quantity will have a magnitude and a unit. Okay, so let's see what's this about. We have one base quantity and we have one derived quantity. So I think that if I explain you what is derived quantity first, you will simply understand what do I mean by base quantity. So first of all, let's just see the definition, okay? So base quantities are quantities that cannot be derived from other quantities. For example, length. So when you are finding the length of someone, uh, length of someone, not length of someone, length of something. So suppose you are finding the length of this rectangle, and like you want the length of this rectangle. Okay, so you just measure it, right? You cannot find the length through some calculation. So this is a base quantity. This length is a base quantity. Let's talk about the width. This width of this rectangle, for example width, we need to measure it, right? We cannot find it through calculation. So this width is also a base quantity. Let's see what's derived quantity then. For example, let me just remove these things. Okay. For example, I want to find the area of this rectangle. So we know that area equals to length into width, and suppose that this length equals to 10, this width equals to 5. So this area is 10 into 5, 50, right? So it's 50 meter square. So this area, for example, to find this area we needed the length and the width. We couldn't find the area without the help of the length and the width. So here we can see that derived quantities are quantities that can be derived using base quantities, and here for the area we use length and width, which were base quantities. Another example we can say is, for example, speed. So for speed we need distance and we need time, and we know that distance is a base quantity because you can measure it, you cannot calculate it or find it in some other way, and time is also a base quantity. So we used two base quantities to find a derived quantity. I hope you understood. I think that these are pretty easy stuff and you don't need to like too much concentrate on them. Just understand what's a base quantity and a derived quantity. Basically, base quantities are quantities that cannot be derived from other quantities, and derived quantities are quantities that can be derived using the base quantities. That's it. Let's see the second point, making reasonable estimate of physical quantities. So here I have a list of reasonable estimate of physical quantities, and you have to memorize them because they will come as questions and you need them to do some calculation or solve some problem where they won't ask you for the mass of an adult, for example, but a calculation will involve a mass of an adult and they won't give you the value. For example, this is a pretty like familiar one where you will find questions which require you to use the mass of the earth, but they won't include the mass of the earth. Or for example, density of water, you will get a question which will not mention the density of water, so you have to assume that the density of the water is 1000 kg per meter cube. Basically, you need to memorize all the information in this screen. So take your time and copy it. And I think that's it for explaining physical quantities. I hope you understood both the points, and if you did not understand a point, leave a comment and I will try my best to make you understand that thing. Thank you.